And I'm Joe Moskowitz. Turmoil in Russia, some major power struggle is underway in the fledgling democracy.
The Russian parliament has taken the first step toward impeaching President Boris Yeltsin as the battle for power between the president and the legislature continues. The battle for control of the Russian government is coming to a head. On Sunday, the Russian legislature met in emergency session and voted to ask a court to decide if President Boris Yeltsin violated the Russian Constitution when he declared emergency rule on Saturday. The legislature's action was the first step toward possible impeachment of the president.
Yeltsin's move completely contradicts the Constitution. I tried to dissuade him from it, and I am refusing to sign his decrees.
President Yeltsin declared emergency rule on Saturday to block legislative attempts to halt his reform program. He has even called for a referendum next month that would ask the Russian people to choose between him and the communist-dominated legislature. Observers like former U.S. Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger say the outcome of that vote and the internal struggle in Moscow could determine whether the governmental stalemate will turn into a civil war.
There clearly is that potential. Yeltsin obviously has made a judgment that he could not continue the way it was going. He was being emasculated. He was losing whatever power he had, that he had to face this thing. Now, the question will be, fundamentally, whether he gets sufficient support from the Russian people.
The U.S. continues to voice support for President Yeltsin in his fight with the legislature, a move Long Island Congressman Gary Ackerman says is the proper one.
We have no choice. We must, I believe, support President Yeltsin in his march to democratization.
Now, a spokesman for President Yeltsin says he won't step down if impeached. And Russia's defense minister says the army, a great wild card in this dispute, will stay out of the struggle for power. Joe?
While Yeltsin struggles with lawmakers over who should govern the country, Russian emigres in the United States are worried about what's happening in their homeland. News 12's Reni Mitchell spoke with some Russians visiting Long Island for a Seder.
For many of these Russian Jews, it was the first Seder they had ever attended. And although they were enjoying the freedom of being allowed to express their religious beliefs, for some it was marred by a reminder of the turmoil going on in their home country.
It's very difficult because you really, I want to help so much. You know, my family wants to help them, but there's really not much we can do. The only thing we do is, maybe give them a visa or something, but still they have to wait for at least like another 2-3 years.
Boris Yeltsin's Saturday night announcement declaring emergency rule and seeking an April 25th vote of confidence has brought many Russians to the streets to voice their opinions. It's also brought the Russian parliament together to review Yeltsin's decision and consider impeachment proceedings. Many people have lost faith in the Russian president, once professed to be the savior of a struggling country.
He promised a lot of good things, and everybody want to be better, and they believed him, and they went after, they followed him, but now they thought that is nonsense.
But it's the future of the Soviet Jews that has Joseph Bakarev concerned. He was able to leave Russia with some family members, but left many others behind.
The Jewish people always was persecuted in this country, and I felt on myself anti-Semitism, and I feel what will become so bad. Jewish people will never come out from this country.
Many of the Russians were comforted with the fact that the United States has thrown its support with Yeltsin.
I think Boris Yeltsin has done a great deal in terms of bringing democracy and freedom to the Soviet Union. I would hate to see him displaced.
No matter what happens, it seems likely that Boris Yeltsin's actions calls for a showdown in what's been a long struggle in Russian politics, and an even longer struggle for those trapped within. Reni Mitchell, News 12, Long Island.
Here in the United States, 7 cult members emerged from that compound in Waco, Texas today. FBI agents are now very optimistic. They say these releases and what they are calling positive telephone conversations with cult leader David Koresh could mean he's ready to compromise. Officials say all 7 people released today will be detained as material witnesses. The federal authorities say a total of 34 cult followers left the compound since the standoff began 3 weeks ago.
New York's former Chief Judge Sal Wackler is reportedly considering a deal which could keep him from going to trial, but the Associated Press says the 62-year-old Wackler could still spend 18 months behind bars if he agrees to plead guilty to one felony charge. Wackler had to step down from the state's highest court after he was arrested for allegedly trying to extort money from his ex-lover and threatening to kidnap her daughter. He's currently under house arrest at his Manhasset home.
A Hofstra University counselor has been fired because of behavior the university says was unethical, inappropriate, and unprofessional. A special panel had been investigating sexual misconduct charges against Dr. Ruben Starashevsky. One former student and 2 employees accused the doctor of sexual harassment. A special panel investigating the charges recommended to the Hofstra president that he should be dismissed. But a university spokesman says this is not a case of sexual harassment.
What the panel found is that Dr. Starashevsky probably did kiss Ms. Rudishan, all right? But again, the panel made a decision on Dr. Starashevsky's behavior, and the president of the university was totally in sync with their decision.
The university says it has not yet heard from Starashevsky or his attorneys.
The child custody battle between filmmaker Woody Allen and actress Mia Farrow continues, and while Allen says experts in Connecticut have cleared him of Farrow's charges that he sexually abused their 7-year-old adopted daughter, he says the investigation has been emotionally very difficult on him. According to today's Daily News, Allen says he couldn't watch children's TV shows or movies. He couldn't even look at them in parks. He says it caused him physical pain just to watch a man playing with a child.
And the man who's been linked to the bombing of the World Trade Center is now in trouble with the law in his native country. Blind Muslim cleric Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman is facing a new trial stemming from an anti-government protest 4 years ago. So far, though, Egypt has yet to ask the United States to extradite the Sheikh. Meanwhile, the Sheikh has denied any involvement with the bombing of the World Trade Center.
Long Islanders are still waiting to hear about federal aid for damage suffered during the blizzard of '93, but if you haven't applied for help because of the December 11 storm, I'm afraid it's too late. The deadline for applying for federal emergency grants and low-interest loans was at 5 p.m. today.
You may have never heard of New Suffolk. It's a tiny North Fork hamlet with a business district that amounts to a post office and a general store. But that business district burned to the ground last week, and now New Suffolk residents are fighting to keep the town's identity. News 12's Petra Schaefer has more.
A few dozen of New Suffolk's residents spent this Sunday as they always have, gathering down at the post office. But this Sunday was different because a fire destroyed the building, which also houses the general store last week. And when it went up in smoke, so did part of New Suffolk.
It's the hub of this community. It's the heart and soul of this community. It's maybe America the way it used to be and hardly exists anymore.
For many, the post office was part of their history.
We grew up with it, and like I said, it's been a heritage to my family because it was here when my mother was born in 1888.
And it was becoming part of the childhood of others.
I would come down here to get my mail, and I guess it'd be an excuse to go into the general store. Over the summer, that and the beach was a second home to me. My friends and I would spend all our time down here.
New Suffolk residents met to discuss their loss yesterday.
But what came out of that meeting was that people just feel very strongly that they want the post office back here no matter who owns the property. And so what happened was there was a committee formed to study ways that that might happen.
The Civic Association and the town face a problem if they want to purchase this property and rebuild the post office. And that's money, because along with this building, the post office lot also includes 3.5 acres of very expensive waterfront property. But even if New Suffolk can overcome modern-day land prices and rebuild on this very site, they all agree they lost something in the fire that can't be replaced. Will it ever be the same?
No. Not like working here.
In New Suffolk, Petra Schaefer, News 12, Long Island.
Still ahead on the night edition, the death toll reaches a new high in the occupied Gaza Strip. 6 outstanding athletes are inducted into a new Hall of Fame in Comac and strengthening the African